Thanks for coming. So, it's 2008, 2007, I can't even remember the time. And I wanted to create my own website. So the first thing I did was to decide how I was going to write it. Obviously, I was a developer. And as a developer, I wanted to create my own website. So what did I do? Rather than using WordPress or whatever the newfangled CMS was at the time, I wanted to create my own platform. And that was it. So I looked around, I browsed the sites I really liked and loved, other blog sites I wanted to use. And I found one. I found a design. I was like, that's it. Now it's 2011, so 2007, if you remember, it was all about gradients at the time. Like gradients in the headers, gradients in the buttons, glass effects. It was awesome. So how do you create that? CSS was really crap at the time, if you remember as well. Anyone doing web development at the time. So what I did was I downloaded Photoshop, as every respected non-designer will do. And I got lost into trying to create that gradient, right? So remember those ones? Those were the days, right? Awesome stuff. Like, how do you create that? Photoshop is like this. I was totally lost. So I spent like 5 hours trying over and over and over again. I gave up. Now, when it comes to design, if you ask my wife, if it's about doing straight lines, I can do that. Dead easy. I could be an architect. Ask me to draw a nice landscape or put some nice colors over there, and I'm done. Like, I know 5 colors, maybe 6. I'm so bad with colors that my wife has actually banned me from teaching colors to our kids. Because what she calls purple, I call pink. And what she calls salmon, I call, I don't know. Like, it's a color, right? So, yeah, I stopped. I gave up. I called my friend Tom. Tom's a designer. He spent his days doing Photoshop stuff at the time. Dude, you need to come over. I'm struggling here. Right, okay. I'll be there in the afternoon. Just wait for me. So he comes in, and he goes, like, what are you trying to do? I'm trying to create a gradient button like this one, like that. I was like, okay, that's fine. I'm kidding you not. He sits down on the desk, spends 5 minutes, and he comes out with this. Is this what you want? And I'm going, oh, yes. So Tom killed my designer ambitions, and it's a good thing because I now know my limitations. I'm never ever going near Photoshop again. Now, why am I talking about Photoshop? Because as a brand new developer or designer if you want to call that, I felt like that. I was lost. And then when you give Visual Studio to young developers, they go like, this is like Photoshop. I don't know what I'm doing. And what I also find is that even though people have been using Visual Studio for a good few years, they still do the very basic things that they learned the first time, and they can't really leverage all the productivity and all the tips and tricks that we, since 2001, in fact, have been releasing on a steady pace. So my goal today is to guide you through that process of decoupling the mystified Visual Studio, and hopefully leaving this room today, you have quite a few tricks up your sleeve, so when you go back to doing some coding tomorrow, you'll be able to do some pretty awesome stuff. So, Visual Studio 2017 was released, multiple releases in fact, since last year we had RCs, RC1, RC2, RC Final, Beta 2, RC, you know, the usual naming at Microsoft that we love so much. But now we are on 15.4, I think, update, and now it's 2017 with 15.4, which again doesn't make any sense in terms of numbering, but yeah, your guess is as good as mine. But we have released a lot of things. There's another session, I think either today or tomorrow, by Casey, who's the PM for Visual Studio, and I'm not going to steal her thunder because she's going to be presenting all the funky stuff that we released recently. I'm just going to enumerate them very quickly. But what I'm going to be talking about today is about the things that they've been out there for a while, since maybe 2010, that you can use while you do your coding, whether you like keyboard shortcuts, whether you like using the mouse. There's some really interesting things that you can do. Right. So what's been released? We have a faster installation. If you've ever been into a hackathon and you went like, oh, let's learn C#, let's download Visual Studio. There you go, 8 gigabytes of downloads. I'll see you tomorrow, guys, when you have installed everything and we're ready to rock and roll. That's go now. So you have a very base installation that allows you to do things very quickly and get off the ground within minutes. We have a faster launch as well. Depending on what you want to work, you can decide how your workload is going to be based. We have faster solution loads for both C++ and C#. Faster Git operation, so if you'd like to use the Git GUI client inside Visual Studio, then we also have that. And faster F5 to start debugging your applications. Now obviously if you are doing the latest and greatest like .NET Core and .NET Standard, then we actually changed the format of that CSPros file, and that's part of Visual Studio 2017 now. However, as I said, I'm not going to steal the cases thunder, and I have other interesting stuff that we can do. So without any further ado, we're going to go into the demos. So this is primarily demo stuff. I'm going to be going through things, and I'll be discussing about how I do stuff and how I work with Visual Studio. Some of these you might find familiar, some of these might be totally new, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask me, okay? So let's come out of there, and let's go into my Visual Studio. And I have loads of notes here, so if you are interested in what I do, because we're probably going to be covering quite a few small things, I'm happy to release the notes, and you can grab them and then go and follow them as you go through. So first things first, you see I've got capitalization. Did anyone use Visual Studio 2013 when we capitalized all the menus and people were like, what? Why are you shouting at me? I don't want that. Right, so you can actually change that. If you go into tools, that's the first thing you can actually change. If you go into options and go into general, you can apply title casing. Check this out. So no more fights whether you want uppercase or lowercase. Choose the way that you want to do it. So that was a big thing in 2013. We forced everyone to go and shout to everybody else, and now we took it away. So now if I do that, you'll notice all my menus are nice and small. Hey, no more fights. Right, let's come out of there. I think we can stop here, right? Capitalization. Right, let's go home. What did we do? We had faster startup, obviously. I did explain that. We have the lightweight stuff. Now, one thing I really like about the new tools. How many here use ReSharper? You stop using, I'm just kidding. But there are a lot of things that ReSharper used to do that we now do as part of Visual Studio. And when I go to people and say, why you use ReSharper? Because I like to search for things. And I was like, okay, do you like to search for things like control, comma? And then you say, I want something like model. And then you see that. That's a universal new search that is a go-to all. And as you hover over them as well, you can have a preview into the page. So it's some really interesting things there that you can actually do with that. But beyond that, we have some really clever things here. So you can actually do a line search. So if I zoom in here, you can do a line search. So within your same file, if you want to go to a specific line because maybe you got an exception and you want to go straight into that line in that file, we can do that for you. You might say, well, that's not really hard here because your file is only that long. I saw a file the other day that had 9,000 lines of code. I'm kidding you not. It's like, oh my God, the horrors. But you can search in that now. We can also do a search on the files if you want to search on files by name. We also search by type as well. So that's very important. We have go-to member if you want that. So there you go, jump straight into that. I didn't even do anything, so it does all that for me. And then finally we have symbols. Now we have different searches there, so you can have a universal search across your whole solution, or you can do a search within the current document. I tend to leave it as default in there. The other nice thing is that you can actually change the way that it actually presents the results to you. So you can use the preview pane, which I'm using right now. You can also ask to show some details. So if I do that, it will give me some more information about my files. And then finally, you can center the window so it's in a different location. This universal search has solved a lot of problems. So if you are used to doing Control-T in ReSharper and that's the only thing you use it, so you can use this one. I'm not saying don't use ReSharper, I'm just saying that some of the things that ReSharper used to do now we do as native inside Visual Studio, so you don't need a plugin just to do a universal search. Everyone with me so far? Good. You can also use a keyboard shortcut. So if I do colon, then it changes straight into the line number, so you can actually do that without using the mouse. So if you're a keyboard person, we have colon for go to line, we have F for files, and then we'll search for files, and you see how it actually gives me some more information about the files and so on. Brilliant stuff. I love that search. Coding styles. Who likes coding styles? Who in the team enforce coding styles through specific? Just one person. Look at that. All right. Come on. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. I've worked with different teams, and we always have that internal debate. Is it string or is it var? I don't know. What should we do? Should we enforce things? Now, there are things inside Visual Studio 2017, like analyzers that allow you to do the same kind of thing, like saying we have coding standards or rules about privates before public and statics before privates and so on, which is brilliant, but you have to download an analyzer, which is fine. It's very lightweight. It all happens behind the scenes. So unlike the earlier versions of StyleCorp where you had to install the package and everybody had to install it on their machines to get it to work, now it's a NuGet package that you download and run it, and then it analyzes your code in the background, so it's not an extra step in the build. Things happen much faster. However, you might have your own preferences. You might say, well, I want to use some kind of styling inside Visual Studio. And for that, you can go Style. I'll speak about that search, by the way, in a bit, but in the meantime, there's a code style here. Let me zoom into that. That allows you to define a few things, like you can enforce whether you want to use these or whether you want to use a var, how your locals are defined. And the nice thing about this is you can actually change the severity of things. So if we go down into my var example, which again tends to be a thorny subject in the teams, and say I prefer to use var, or let's say I prefer to use explicit because my solution has primarily var stuff, and then change it to error, and then OK that one, and do a build, Control-Shift-B. If I go down to my error list, hello, interesting. Maybe I went the other way around. Should be explicit, isn't it? Code styles. Yep, let's do it again. So I want prefer explicit type, yeah, and throw an error. Should be okay. And close that one down and do a rebuild. Actually, it should be the whole solution, not just that. Interesting. That used to work. It's a new feature. It's a feature. No, it should work. But there are two things to do there. One is the code styles. Maybe I changed the C# the VB. So it's very interesting. I was testing that earlier on, and that worked fine. That worked fine. It's fine. It's live demos. Nothing can go wrong. Just warning. Let's change the warning. Save that. If it does work, I'll skip on. Because succeeded. There you go. That's weird. Okay. So this is only for you if you actually want to enforce coding styles inside your solution, inside your project. But this is only localized to your Visual Studio. Obviously, if you work in a team, you don't want to do that. You want to enforce that at a higher level. So unlike in the past where you would use something like, again, StyleCorp or FXCorp to enforce these, now Microsoft went out and said, I think it's about time that we actually embrace the community and the coding standards that we use around and outside Microsoft and .NET. So we introduced this thing called editor config. How many of you have used editor config or know what that is? No one. 2 people. Okay, good. So editor config is an open source initiative. So if I just jump onto my browser and I go into my editor config, this is it. So editor config is for lots of languages, not just .NET, not just Visual Studio. And the idea is that you can apply an editor config file onto your application, and that will enforce some kind of settings. So in here, we have something like root, and then you say, we're going to have fun with that one, what kind of indent style you want to have, and what kind of, there's lots of different things they can define there. But obviously, we wanted to make that work for, yep. Show you that in a bit. Jumping ahead, but it's nice. It's a good question because there's like, is it working? Is it not working? Is it there? Or is it not there? Okay. So once you apply that file, and let's go and do that now into my solution. So I should have somewhere around here. So no, it's I actually have that ready for my demos, but apparently I don't have that, so it should be there. So I've got an editor config here. Now, if you don't know how to craft that, which is going to be a bit tricky to do so, the very best thing to do is go into the Roslyn repository in GitHub And they have a very nice editor config which applies this thing. So if I just open that now inside Visual Studio Code, because it's slightly faster, and I zoom that in, you notice there's something different here. We have a .NET style qualification, and then we have some items here like true suggestion, and then true error, and true ignore. The idea here is that we actually extended that, so we're working with the community to support .NET style editor config settings. And when you do that, you apply that into your solution, as we will do in a second. And so these are the standard items we have here. So once you do that and you apply it, you'll see that Visual Studio will pick it up. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to copy it into here. Now sometimes you have to reload Visual Studio, so let's see if it picks it up. And if it doesn't, then we can just go and reload Visual Studio. So open folder in solution. So did you guys know about that? Open folder in solution. So if you want to go where your project sits and you don't have to dig and like, is it C program files, is it C my name, projects, whatever, you can go at any level from the solution all the way top down and select the Open in File Explorer. So that will open straight into that. Now there's a nice trick over there, so if I come out of there, now let's assume you're doing .NET stuff, .NET Core stuff, and you want to open the command line straight away. That's a freebie. If you type CMD, that will open the command line straight into that folder. So you don't have to do CD, 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 and find where your location are. And if you want to change that, you can say PowerShell from within the same environment. And you can even do bus. Now that's insane, right? That's Linux straight into your command line from the folder, right? Let's ignore that. Let's skip that. But the idea here is that I'm going to copy my editor config. I think I copied it, didn't I? No. So let's go back to that file again. So copy that. And then paste here. So that's there now. Everybody can see that. That's good. So if I come in here, this item does not support previewing. So it's not being picked up. What we can do is we can actually file, close solution, and then open the solution again. Yes, there's an extension. I think there's an extension for everything these days. So it all comes down to how many extensions do you want to run, because now Visual Studio will give you a nice warning whether your extensions are actually slowing down your solution. So you might want to be careful about how many extensions you use, and I've been bitten by that in the past. So there you go, that's there. So if I open the file, let me go quickly down here. Check this out. The user preferences for this file are overwritten by your editor config settings. Okay, so you can have multiple levels. Once you apply the file there, it's going to work. Now the interesting thing is that if you already have open files, like 10 open tabs, and you apply editor config, it's not going to work because Visual Studio is not picking it up straight away. So we're still working on making that work better. But the idea there is that once you apply it, and then we can go and change things in here. I don't have it here, it's on a different level, so let me just go and open it again. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a fight in our team whether we want to have space or tabs, right? Because that's what most people fight about. And the easiest way to do that is to change that to a tab. No intelligence here for now, so just I think we're working on that one as well, so you can help you with these things. And if I go back here into my project, it's not going to be picked up straight away. So what I need to do is close that file down and then open it again. And then do, so you see these little dots over here, they actually count how many spaces I have. So I can do Control K, Control D. I think I saved that file, haven't I? I think I have indeed, yes. Please tell me I don't have to reload my solution because that gets annoying. But I might have, so let me just see. So much not what I expected, so close the solution down. So, yes, it's like one of these experiences that should work, but it doesn't work. And it could be because I'm at the wrong level, maybe. So let me just copy that file into the WPF project as well. Although I shouldn't have really, but you can have, there you go, it's already there. Should be picking that up. And the idea is if you do Control K, Control D, it should replace by tabs with spaces, which it doesn't. Now, there's one more caveat there. The problem is that right now, even if we erase errors for those settings that you define in the editor config, you might not get the errors in the build. So even though it comes up, oh, you have an error here because you're using, so check this out. All these errors now have been picked up by my editor config. Obviously, I don't know why it's not actually picking these things up in my changes, but if I zoom in here, you'll see that all these changes that we have here are actually defined as part of my editor config settings. And these are not, some of them are warnings, some of them are mentioned there. If you change them to errors, they will still turn up as errors, not messages. However, it doesn't break your build. And that's a little bit of a, almost there, but not really there, because what you want is eventually to break your build on the CI server by applying the same settings. So VSTS and Visual Studio are working on that to be able to have a proper set style of rules that will apply onto our solution. So let me just come out of that, and pity that my demo didn't work, but I'm skipping the next one. So we did that. So synchronization settings in the past, you would be able to configure your settings inside here. You would say, I want to configure my tabs and my background theme and so on. Now we do it automatically as part of your login. So once you selected your account that you're logging in, I'm logging with my account. Every time you log with a specific account to Visual Studio, it will apply all the settings automatically for you. So there's no way to do that at a specific level, whereas 2013 and 2015 would do that. So sync, if you go into sync, environments, accounts, you'll see we just say synchronize all settings. Now, if you're working in two different Visual Studio instances, one at home, one at work, and you don't want to have the same settings applied, just come and check this out, and then it will be totally different, even though you check in with the same account, okay? That's the one, and we're going to notifications. You guys get notifications about things that are going to be installed. You know, there's a new update for data tools, there's a new update for TypeScript, there's a new update for .NET Core. You can ignore them safely now, because every time you ignore one, and you say dismiss, I don't want to download this thing, it's not going to go away forever. Maybe you know that a specific version of TypeScript is broken and you don't want to install that. You want to wait for the next version. To do that, you just dismiss the message here, and then the next time there's an update to your tooling or your extensions, you'll get notification again. So feel free to actually dismiss settings a lot more confidently right now, but we're a little bit less intrusive into your face when it comes to actually updating and applying settings. Multiple drag and drop windows. How many of you work on multiple screens? Brilliant. So how many of you spin up another window with some of the tabs? Not many, okay. How many of you create a separate instance of Visual Studio so you can actually have proper solution explorers on the side? A few of you, okay. So let me just blow your mind there, right? Okay, so let's say you want to work on, I'm on my web project and I want to work on my models, and I want to have that kind of a, let me just open that one. So let's say we're working on our models and I want to have my models on a separate window and my front end on the separate window while I'm working like that. So at any level you want in your project, you can actually go and create a new Solution Explorer view. So what this one will do is we'll spin up a new Solution Explorer that's the same instance of Visual Studio, so you don't have to run two Visual Studios to do that. And then you can open any files you want. So if I open this one, and then I can attach this. Hello, where's my window? Where'd it go? So there. And I want to attach this. Really. Stop hiding from me. Stay here. Stay. 3 windows all over the place. There you go. It shouldn't be that hard if you have a second screen, by the way. But see, that's my limitation here. So now every time you open something, every time you add a new file, so that's already open there, that's why it just jumped there. So if I bring this here, then it will open here. Okay, so you can have multiple windows open. So you can have multiple instances of the Solution Explorer alone without multiple instances of Visual Studio eating up your memory. That's very important. And you can have as many as you want. Once you're happy and you're done with the project, you can control select multiple ones and then drag them into the previous solution and then close things down. Now, when I started working with Visual Studio, probably 16 years ago, showing how old I am, I used to do this, like very early days. I would just go and drag that, and like, oh my my God, where does it go? I can't remember where that window goes. If you ever happen to have like lots of windows all over the place, you can do Control and double right click. It will take it back to its default location. And if you really screw up your Solution Explorer and everything is all over the place, you can go into Windows, and then you can go Reset Windows Layout. Have anybody used ever that before? Good. And you just go, boop, okay, I'm going to reset everything back to default. But you might have a nice layout that you prefer to use and you love using. So what you can do is you can actually go into Windows again, and there, and you can actually save a Windows layout. So if you want to have everything expanded because your home screen or your computer at work has a massive real estate and you want to have everything out, then you can apply that style. But when you go home and work on your PT 13.5-inch laptop like I do, I want to have everything hidden away, so I have two different styles applied. You can have as many as you want and you can apply them. So you might see here, I already have some Windows saved from previous demos, like a default layout, which is mine. You can use keyboard shortcuts as well to change from one to another very quickly. Tab split view. So, you know when we work on the same file and you want to like, oh, I have a function up here, but I want to see the function while I'm working on another function? This is really cool. You know, you can do that. The first time I saw it, I was like, that's insane. So that's the same file, but you can have two different locations within the same file. And you can be working on one function at the top and then another function at the bottom, and I can see what I'm doing without having to spin up another tab or another vertical tab or whatever you want. And then you can go and hide it back there. There. And you can also right click and then go into scroll bar options, and you can say, I want to use a little bit of a more space, give me more stuff. I want a huge taskbar. And that's quite nice as well, because it allows you to quickly jump into a location of your file. You can also identify errors quite easier as well. And then you can go back into the default because I don't have that much real estate. There you go. The preview tab, which we'll see while we debug things, open in Explorer, I've shown you that. Control T to go anywhere you want. Quick Launch, I love Quick Launch. How many of you use Quick Launch, if you know what that is? A few people, right. So I never know where my menus are. Like I want to spin up my diagnostics, I have no idea. I want to go into my code style, and we've actually just seen earlier on that today. So you can jump up here, Quick Launch finds you everything that has to do with menus or context, or anything you want with regards to managing your Visual Studio. So if I wanted to work on my text editor style, so I can say text there, but if I want to see my immediate window, and then it actually pops up with everything you're looking for. And you can be a little bit more clever with that and then use some shortcuts. So if you do at, it allows you to filter into specific areas. So you might want to look into only options, or you might want to be looking into open documents, or you might want to be looking into menus exclusively because, you know, it's somewhere in the menu, but I don't know where it is. And in fact, that's so good that I never use the menus these days. I just go Quick Launch, find me something I want, like IntelliTrace or finding files or whatever you want, and then it finds it. So start making use of that because it's very clever. You don't have to spend time looking around. So we discussed about the next thing. Obviously, it's about search. We added search all over the windows, everywhere. So if you go into Tools, you find options there. You can see we have a nice search. We have a nice search for all the files. Every single menu we have will have obviously. Oh, I reset quite a few things. And so error list as well. Now, there's one thing that we changed quite a bit. That's the show all references or find all references. What you notice here is that we've actually added colorization to that, so you can identify easier what you're using. And then as you hover over or you zoom in, it actually shows you the code. So if I go down there. So that's very nice. You don't have to jump into a specific file. You can find it straight from the find all references. And because it's colorized, it gives you a nice view of what you're doing. So we discussed about zoom. If you are using your hands and you have a touch screen and you want to quickly show things, you can actually zoom in and zoom out. So I'm just zooming in with my fingers right now. You can touch the scroll bar. We improved the touch experience quite a bit. So I don't use it when I develop stuff, but when I do demos, it's quite nice to be able to go, yeah, let's zoom into here, and then I can actually see what I'm doing if I don't want to switch context. And you can also double tap to select things, and if you hold in, you can see that we have the access to the menu now, so you can, all this is done with my fingers. So much better experience even for touch-enabled devices. Right, okay, so let's do some debugging or some coding there. So everybody can see the code quite well. Now, everyone does that, right? I want to start the process and I want to go into my file and I can't remember where I'm starting from. You can always do right click and step into. So if I'm in the wrong place. Main window.xaml. So if I come down here and say right click, run to cursor, what it will do is we'll actually go and find my entry point. Now this is an awful app that I'm using for the demos, but it actually jumps into a specific location. Now because I haven't put in everything in the code, it just went and found where the starting point is, which in this case is here. Let me see, it's down here in the main window. But you can also do, let me just stop that. You can also do right click and say run to cursor. Now this is interesting because once you know your entry point, we can actually run to cursor and put a ghost breakpoint there for you to allow you to stop into the execution of that specific location, which is quite nice because sometimes you want to jump straight away but you don't want to litter your Visual Studio with breakpoints. Now moving further, see over here I have like 3 different actions that get called in sequence, and sometimes you would do F10, F11, then go back, and then F10, F11, and go back. We've added this thing called right click, step into specific, and this allows you to jump forward to the specific version you want to actually execute, and then have you working with the solution. So in this case, I will want to go into my get conference because I know that there should be a greeting there that should say hello conference, and here you can actually go through the steps and the motions, get exclamation mark and so on. So the idea is you can actually jump straight into these things with a pseudo variable, step into specific, run to cursor. You can also change things on the fly. So if I go back into my code, and I put a breakpoint here because more or less I know where the problem is. To change that, let me fix my application. So we need to have a greeting, which should be conference, I think. Yep. I can't type either. And let's save that. Start. And so we have the edit and continue. So you guys know that as you debug things, you can go and in fact edit things. So in here I can go and say x+1. So that's quite happy now. What happens is, what we do is we commit a dirty version of your code into the backend, and will allow you to continue debugging. But now we should see a conf here, TechDays NL, and then if I continue running, there you go, you have the definition there, which is quite nice if you want to do these things. You can change any variable on the fly as you go through with your code. Next one, we have the low data in the grid. Yeah, so, oh yeah, as we go through stuff, so if I actually restart, and one thing that you can also do is restart. I don't know how many of you use that one as well. It allows you to go straight into where you want the code. We've added this thing called go-to, which is the same as right-clicking and saying jump the code execution and run the code all the way to this endpoint. So if I take it here before we return, you see it actually, again, places a ghost breakpoint there to allow you to run the execution of the code where you want. Now, assuming that I was happy with that, we can actually use the stack trace as well to jump back and forth. So if you ever want to replay the code, you can say, well, I want to go back to here, so set as next statement, which is fine. But if you wanted to, if you're like 10 levels deep and you want to go back to where you started, or maybe go 2 levels back, you can also use the stack, the call stack down here to say run to cursor. So that will take you back all the way to where you were before you came into this code, which is quite interesting. Again, you can play around with how your code executes. You can manage the flow as long as you're within the scope. Right, let's stop this one. Sometimes you want to debug and you always want to break at a specific point, and maybe you don't want to use a breakpoint. So for that, we have a solution for it. Let me just change my solution to spin up my, you guys know you can spin up multiple projects, right? I was speaking to a guy last week, and he said, I didn't know that. So you have to spin up 2 different versions, like one version of Visual Studio will run the website, another version of Visual Studio will run another front end. He's like, oh, I didn't know that. So there you go. You can start multiple, as many as you want. So apply that and click OK. And then let's spin things off. And in this instance, I have a nice application. Let's remove that breakpoint. I have the low data solution. What this one does is I have a debugger.is attached, which in effect what it, debugger.break. And what this one does is, does anybody know what this one does behind the scenes? It actually throws a very special case of null reference exception. So if you leave it in there, it's fine as you debug your code and you run stuff, but once you create a release version of your project and you deploy that to production, every time you run your code, that debugger will throw an exception. So your application will be always throwing an exception, you wouldn't know where it's happening. That's why we need to always wrap it into debuggers attached, which allows you to debug in your code while you develop your application, but when you go into production, you don't run the fear of God of breaking your application, not knowing why it's happening. And I've seen that happening before, so that's, I think I may have created one of these bugs as well myself. Proud owner on one of these bugs. One thing I want to show you as well is we have the, how do you call it? We have visualizers. So if you have data structures, if you have data like JSON or XML and you want to look into them, we actually have specialized visualizers for these things. And one of them is our data sets. How many of you work with data tables, data sets? So we have a data set visualizer. Check this out, which allows you to look into your data set. Obviously, it doesn't render the best when it comes to high DPI. Let the team know about that, and we'll hopefully work on this. But every table inside your data set, you can actually look through that, and you can prod into the data and understand what's happening, so you don't have to create specific debug statements. We have another visualizer, obviously, for the JSON visualizer, which, no, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to select my right visualizer this time. So in here you can say I want my JSON visualizer, and that allows you to look into your JSON. We can also search into the version, so up ID, so you can search into the document as well. We have an XML one, so this one you can't copy. So you can't go right click, I want to copy the data and put it somewhere. You can't. But if you use the XML visualizer, then we'll allow you to do so. So if we go to the next one, I have an XML one, which is here. Beautiful, isn't it? Does that remind you IE something? Well, we still use IE to render these things, which is a bit sad, but on the other hand, it gives you access to your XML if you want to have a look, a prod into that. No search here, but you can copy paste things. So Control-C, done. This is the only visualizer apart from the text visualizer that allows you to do so. And finally, we have an HTML visualizer, which guess which engine it uses to render stuff? IE, way. But at least you get some kind of an output there and you can see stuff. There's also a WPF visualizer. Anyone does WPF stuff? Maybe? Which also finally brought a live 3 view and you can change things on the fly and so on. So there you go. That's one. Any questions so far? Going well? Quite a few things, right? Breakpoints. I love breakpoints. Who doesn't love breakpoints? So one of the things you can do here is you can set a breakpoint, which is fine. Everyone uses those breakpoints, right? But you know we have special breakpoints as well. Right click onto them. You can add conditions. You can create any conditional event that you want, so you can have a conditional expression. The nice thing about that is it's not model anymore, so you can actually go back and say data provider, copy that, bring in here, and do so. But we also give IntelliSense. So if you do data provider, check this out. We even have colorization as we do IntelliSense inside a conditional expression. So I don't even have to remember the names, and then you can actually look into the code, and you can apply any logic you want. Obviously, this is not going to compile, but I'm just saying. So you can do equalization, you can do not equals, any kind of code. You can actually create any kind of code you want there as long as it compiles and runs, and you can also change things on the fly. So conditions are good. They're still a bit slow, so performance remains as crappy as in previous versions, but the team is aware of that, so we're working on improving this. And as I said, you can create any changes you want. But we also have the, so we added that one, so let's close that one. We don't want this one. You see it changed to a nice cross now because it knows that we have a condition. Let's escape that and say right-click, conditions. I don't want that condition anymore, so you can cancel that. And you can also do conditional expressions for, so if you have something like, why did I close? Please, I don't want to save that. There you go, close that. So if we add a condition, and we can also have filter. Now filter is quite handy if you have multi-threaded solutions because now you can filter per thread, which is quite nice. So you can say if that thread by ID or thread name is that, then create a breakpoint. But also it's only used for that. And we have actions as well. So actions allow you to output to a window message. So maybe you have a loop that you want to see how you loop through the values and you want to output them straight quickly without really creating breakpoints or stopping your code. So you can actually use that to output to the output window and will allow you to look into the values of your code. This one is faster than the previous one, but be aware that as you add conditions, it could slow down your application, especially if you got thousands of elements in a loop that you want to look into. Right, so you guys know about the immediate window and the fact that you can actually run lambdas now in the immediate window? Has anybody seen that? Do you want a demo? No, nobody wants a demo. Okay, fair enough. Breakpoints, diagnostics, low by type. So exception settings, multi-threading. A couple more things here to go through. So low by type, so let me stop that. So when you search for things as well, just be aware that we do camel case matching. So if you don't remember or if you remember the function, we don't want to type the whole thing because it's a long method, you can do camel casing search. So as you see here, it applies that, which is quite nice. Go by type, click. So I'll put a breakpoint here. What was I going to show there? Oh yeah, so one of the things I like here to do is just to show you the built-in timer that we have. So sometimes people just go through the code and don't really look into things that, so get, I think it's in the get apps, eventually. Then I'll put the breakpoint there. Get by type, yeah, so if I do load. So as you come in here now, and I start to go through my code, now if I zoom in, you see that we have control 1. See 1 millisecond elapsed, so my code is performing as expected, as like less than 1 millisecond. Then I can go into my next one, again, less than 1 millisecond. And then suddenly that takes like 647 milliseconds. I know this code should be more performance, so if you use that, it's a very nice indicator about identifying things that are taking long. And then what we did is we also tie that into your diagnostics tools so you can actually go and see what's happening and why things are happening so slowly. So you can use that to your benefit to actually start debugging your code without really putting too much effort into spending time with performance tooling or anything else. And in fact, the fact that we have a nice summary here that gives you things like exceptions and events that happen, allow you to go and play back again into your code. And that leaves me with 1 minute and 30 seconds. I know I rattled through quite a few things, and there's a ton more to go through, to be honest. I have a nice list of all these things as I go through the demo, so I'll share that. There's not many slides, to be honest. I'm going to go back to my slides just to prove the point. I'm not for slides. Question, yes?
You talked about extensions, and now you don't have to use resharp, or you have extensions. Can you show a bit extension? What extension exactly?
All right, okay, so there's a nice PDF.
Because the go-to, I don't know it. Probably I don't have this installed extension.
You don't have that, so the go-to is not an extension. That's built into Visual Studio. Yeah, so the control comma, it's actually built into Visual Studio. But if you ever want to know what the mappings are, we have a nice published document, which I'm happy to share. That's, if I zoom in, that gives you some of the new added benefits for what Visual Studio 2017 gives you. And then we have becoming a Power Master user or master of shortcuts, which gives you all the key shortcuts and mappings to what ReSharper does. Now, ReSharper is a beautiful tool. It does lots more things rather than the Control T. So don't think that we've taken away everything from that tool. But if you're just using it for Control T because you want to find files, then that's where it is, right? Any other questions before I close? Yes, question. The vertical split. Where do you find it? All right, let's do that. So there's a slide click, right click, new vertical tab group. No, sorry, there's not one. So there you go, already had there. Done. Yeah, so you can have multiple tabs on each side. You mean the one I dragged the slider? I don't think they ever existed. I don't think we ever had it. I don't know if I'm wrong here, but we have the, it was gone from 2015. Maybe people were not using it. We tend to collect telemetry about how people use stuff anonymously and then apply that. But if you have any questions, you can actually put them into user voice and the team listens to that, or GitHub these days, and they will pick up all these questions. But as far as I know, there never had been a vertical split in the same file, to be honest. I don't know if you can do that. Any other questions, guys? No? So I'll share all my slides. If you have any questions for the stuff that we discussed, find me outside. I'll be here all day. And thank you very much for coming.